This morning's edition of Let's Talk About It is brought to you with the compliments of East Caribbean Flour Mills.
Good morning. It's Friday, the 23rd day of August, 2024. I'm your host, Joshua Hinkson, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rashid Best, and by Sherwood McCaskey. Good morning, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning to you. My good gentlemen, as you are aware, the former parliamentarian and cabinet member and former deputy President of the Senate will be laid to rest after high noon in the yard of St. Catherine's Anglican Church after a service of thanksgiving and praise in the chapel at Coral Ridge. Senator Morris, of course, in fulfillment of his senatorial responsibility and as a friend of the family, he is there with his wife to support the family. Well, the show will go on. The airtime is always here. So this morning I am absolutely delighted to welcome to the studio this morning a gentleman whose good work and legacy are emblazoned throughout Barbados and perhaps the region and anywhere in the world where his good students are to be found. He is celebrated for his work in education, an administrator, a teacher, an author, and of course a researcher. He has conducted extensive research on education in Barbados, and he is here this morning to share that research with us. He will respond to your queries and your calls. Sir, we are delighted to have you, Mr. Alwyn Adams. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you very much.
You know what I was thinking, Mr. Adams, that
yes,
you have, like Senator Morris, good reason to begin by saying good morning to the people of Black Bess also.
Oh, yes. I actually went to school there during the 1950s at the then Black Bess School, which is now Gordon Greenwich School. At that time it was deemed to be kind of in the outback, but nonetheless we brought it into the limelight. Yes, but thanks, I'm very happy to be here. I'd like to start by giving my regards and condolences to the Greenwich family. Cappy, he was very well known, Rudolph Cappy Greenwich. He was a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, I spoke with him just 2 days before, his demise. He died, and I'm very saddened with his passing. And I'm sure that the whole of Barbados will also be mourning his passing. He was a teacher like myself, taught in Barbados and outside of Barbados. I think he was in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and I at one point was in the Bahamas as well as in the United Kingdom, and over time we became very great friends. As a matter of fact, while I was principal at Coleridge and Parry, we needed a guest speaker. The Prime Minister couldn't make it, and he was Minister of Education, and he came and he did a magnificent job. So my condolences go to the British family.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. Of course, I should have reminded our listeners that Mr. Adams was also a senator, an independent senator of Barbados, and he's also celebrated for those invaluable contributions in the Senate of Barbados, from which I'm sure many policies were made, and we, of course, benefit from those today.
Thank you.
Okay, sir, we appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you, Joshua.
Yes. Now our focus today will be on education, Mr. Adams.
Yes.
Education, and a special discussion on 200 years of secondary education in Barbados.
It's interesting that you start there, because it was in 1824 that the first Anglican Bishop of Barbados arrived here, and he turned out to be a prolific church builder. But what was perhaps as significant, or in a way even more significant than that he decreed that wherever the churches were built, particularly what he referred to as chapels of ease, All Saints, and these various other, apart from the parish churches, that 2 schools primary schools should be built. One for boys, one for girls. The boys to be headed by a master and headmaster, and the girls' school by headmistress. And he was very successful, and after him, Bishop Parry came in the 1840s, and he continued in that light. And so, within a reasonable time frame, Barbados had, I would say, satellite schools across Barbados, and in that sense, it kind of marked Barbados out from the other Caribbean islands, where the primary schools did not, extend as fast and as rapidly. It was, however, in the secondary section that the Anglican Church also played its part, and in this case, it was Bishop Mitchinson, and he has been credited, lauded, even revered. I think the Agricultural Reporter dubbed him as the founder of liberal education in Barbados in relation to secondary school. I think, though, that what I would like to bring into the discussion is to have a re-examination of his role, and to some extent the church's role, in education in Barbados. Because while on the one hand we are happy that they did go into the realm of education, digging deeper into the whole system, we find that it did not include the black population in the way that the Barbados public now tend to believe. And in fact, the development of Barbados, the social and economic development in Barbados, has almost been in some ways dictated or thwarted by the kind of education that blacks were allowed to have over a period of time. So I hope that when the program gets going, that the general public would be able to ask questions that would provoke certain responses from me, because I'm not here to give a lecture. Right. But I will try to indicate that, in fact, the education system that we now have needs to be reformed, because the structure of the system has essentially, the fundamentals of it have really remained the same as it was in the 19th century, and that is heavily in favor of the grammar schools that were set up by Mitchinson. Some Barbadians may not be aware that that is where they started, and coming all the way up to the 1950s, those grammar schools were kept deliberately small in order to keep out the masses of the Barbadian population. So much so that by 1949, when I interviewed Sir Elliot Belgrave, who was a product of the Coleridge School, and I asked him what was the role of the school like, and he smiled. I personally knew it was small, but not so small. And he said to me, just around 50 or so. And he went on to say that the Parry School, which was over in the St. Lucy's churchyard, that it probably had just as little or less. And so that up to 1949-50, with the Barbados population probably approaching 250,000 people, we only had 2,500 people in our secondary schools. This is the older secondary schools. Right. And by that time, the modern school had been built by Louis Lynch. And the modern school itself, which was a fee-paying private school, had about 1,500 children, almost as many children as all of the combined schools together. So, and apart from that, it was the limited aspect of the education. The public may not know that a deliberate attempt was made to keep out and exclude any semblance or reference to Barbadian or African or black history, so that the history and the heritage and the even the language and so on that blacks had were actually kept out of the grammar school. And it is really something to refocus on, because if an education system deliberately tell an entire race of people that they have no history and they have no culture, it is really robbing them of their identity and their self-esteem, and I dare say their humanity. And to the extent that that system still exists today, and it does, it bedevils the society up to this day, and it therefore poses, in my opinion, an existential threat to the development of the country. And in that sense, it ought to be abolished. And then, indeed, to maintain that system after it began to come under pressure from the masses of Barbados, the English arbiters in Barbados, the headmasters of the same grammar schools and the heads of the Anglican Church and other influential people, they made sure that when secondary education was expanded, that it would keep the black masses out of the elite schools. And therefore the Barbadian public ought to know that when the what we now call the newer secondary schools were established, which was the St. Leonard's boys and the St. Leonard's girls, others came later, Princess Margaret and so on, they were designed for the working class. And the gulf between the newer secondary school, which is what they were really called, they were not comprehensive schools, that's a different concept, the gulf was as wide as the Atlantic Ocean. The children went to school at 14, which really was the same age that they were virtually going to school at the primary schools. Right. They were not allowed to sit overseas exams. They didn't have any textbooks and anything like that. The curriculum was vastly different. And so, right there was established a two-tier system of education, and which meant that the students who go to the newer secondary schools would be the students who couldn't get in to the elite schools, and therefore they were at a severe disadvantage. I hope that the Barbadian public would call in, because what happened is that Barbadians are not all foolish, and so they recognized that this was their disadvantage. Mm-hmm. So they now made more noises to the government. The first noise brought the secondary schools. The second noise came about, protests came about, because they're saying they are still getting the dirty end of the stick. And again, it was the principals.
Okay, so just for that thought, Mr. Adams, we'll go to our phone lines now, but before we do that, I just remind you of our numbers to call. You can call us at 434-1007 or at 434-1070. We also welcome your WhatsApp messages via 434-1007. It's 16 minutes past 9. Good morning. Let's talk about it.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Greetings and salutations to your great self and your new commentator. A few years ago, former minister in the Right Honorable Owen Arthur's administration, the Honorable Elizabeth Thompson, recommended that Barbados should invest in offshore drilling, an idea that the Honorable Mayor Amor Motley's administration should revisit, as there is an abundance of evidence that we have crude oil, as crude oil sits out in the ground in various parts of the island. We have to stop cherishing the alleged rumor that the oil then gone to Trinidad and we cannot encroach on Trinidad. Why not St. Lucia and St. Vincent, geographically speaking, are more or close neighbors? Guyana took the Honorable Elizabeth Thompson idea and now is a very rich country from offshore drilling. We once contemplated of having a gas line from Trinidad to Barbados. I never deem it necessary having our own oil and gas. I think the late Right Honorable Professor Owen Arthur made a mistake. However, mistakes are part of life. Everyone makes mistakes. Then everyone regrets them. But some learn from them, some end up making them again. It's up to you to decide if you'll use your mistakes to your own advantage. We shall be proud of our women having the guts to enter politics. I once was Miss Thompson's NEC representative for almost 9 consecutive years. When she tried regaining the seat for the 3rd consecutive time, I introduced her as once, twice, 3 times a lady. However, exchange of power. When a man loves a woman, she becomes his weakness. When a woman truly loves a man, he becomes her strength. This is called the exchange of power. I see it necessary for the Honorable Mayor Amor Motley as CQC reshuffling her cabinet, dropping with the deputy leader of the Senate, Senator, the Honorable Elizabeth Thompson. Change is never easy, but it's happy for growth. I shall conclude by saying...
Caller, before you conclude, caller, good morning. Thank you for that presentation. I want to address the point you made about drilling and searching for resources off the coast of the island. You mentioned the former Prime Minister, Professor Arthur, exploring the idea, but this current administration, I do recall the Government Information Service quoting Senior Minister Kerry Simmons. I believe this is when he was Minister of Energy and Business, and we are currently in the process of issuing licenses to those companies that can do the research off the coast of the island, rather. The exploration for those resources. So the idea has been taken on board, and it has been turned into a government policy. No doubt, I am sure, influenced by Senator Elizabeth Thompson.
I shall conclude now by saying falling down is an accident. Staying down is a choice. Have a most enjoyable weekend.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much, caller. We go to our next call. Good morning. Let's talk about it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am pleased and very happy to have heard your guest, Mr. Adams.
Thank you.
And the comments that he have made, because apparently there is a distinct lack of the educational history of this island. With the free secondary education and free university, many people have lost the realization of the struggles that black Barbadians had to achieve any sort of education in the early 19th century, in the early 1900s. And it was particularly difficult for women to be educated. Apparently, the Allen School, under the headship of Errol Barrow's father, he started to have some women, and they were tutored by his wife on the balcony of the school. Unfortunately, after the powers at be realized that he was having females being tutored, he quickly was either pushed out, forced out, but he left and went to the United States. And without the modern high school that you mentioned, many black Barbadians would not have been educated. And I am surprised to see that no one saw fit to make him Mr. Louis Lynch, a national hero. If you trace many of prominent Barbadians across the world, they were educated at the modern high school. And not only was he an educator, but he went across the world and found various institutions, whether or not it was hospitals, universities, whatever, and he directed a number of Barbadian students to further their education at these institutions. And I know for a fact many of the church schools, which were headed especially, well, the church schools were headed by the priest. The priest in the particular community, he oversaw the schools, whether or not it was a boys' school or girls' school. And they had a lot of influence on who went to a secondary school. And like you said, the black masses were not encouraged or permitted to go to high school. And at one point, one had to be a landowner to be admitted into secondary school.
Okay, ma'am, just stick a pin and allow Mr. Adams to respond to your comments.
Yes, thank you very much, ma'am. You seem to be very well versed in the
thank you.
History and the educational aspect of that history. You know, it's interesting that you should bring and focus on the history, which I was trying to do. It was in 1992, a few years after I became principal, that Val McCommie, in an address, he was an educator and a diplomat, and in an address to NACE, he made the point that it was extremely important for the education planners, and he was addressing senior education personnel, to be able to know and understand the history, the development of the Barbadian society, and in terms of its economic and social development. And indeed, the part that education played in that development. Now, the reason why I focus on that is because the education system in Barbados deliberately excluded, as I mentioned before, Barbadian and West Indian history from the curriculum. And therefore, so long as the people did not, or I would say the victims who entered the schools, were not taught their history, they were open to indoctrination and propaganda. And indeed, I would want to be a bit provocative here and say that a substantial part of our education right up to independence and after was heavily a heavy dose of indoctrination.
I agree.
In order to kind of condition us to accept white supremacy and British colonial domination. And therefore, when we are speaking about education reform, it cannot be discussed without looking at that historical development and also linking it to the social and economic development of the country.
That's very important.
Yes, and I believe, in fact, what Val McCombie was saying, that if the education planners or education reformers attempt to reform education without that understanding and that knowledge, that they will falter in the attempt to get the reform going. And I believe, I am saying right now, that it is a deficit in relation to the history and the role of education in the economic development that is hindering the pace of the reform in Barbados. So I want to thank you profusely.
Before you go, another thing about the social and economic situation within the educational system, one must remember that up to about 1950-51, to get into a secondary school, it was so restrictive. They used to have an interview, and I was told by a very reliable source, when she went to the interview at Queen's College, the interviewers were asking her all kinds of questions, and she did not answer. And they asked, "Are you shy? Why are you not answering the questions?" And in her worst English, she said, "Why don't see what these questions got to do with me coming to school here?" And immediately that interview was concluded, and the girl was returned to her father. She is not one of us. And that reoccurred across the island to get into Queen's College. So with that type of thing, if we're not progressing educationally, how can you then go out and start progressing financially or anything like that? And one must remember the context of Barbados, because up to and including to the mid-50s, the only thing that anyone could do in terms of jobs was related to the sugar industry. Because even though you may have been educated, the barriers in the job market was there.
Okay, ma'am.
Up to 1967.
Okay, ma'am. Let's allow Mr. Adams to respond to your comments after our commercial break, but we thank you for your contribution. Stay with us.
At Koiman, we know every project starts with a vision, a spark of inspiration to build, beautify, construct, and create. And whether you're a construction pro, a home improver, or a decorative DIYer, Koyman has the products, inspiration, and advice to complete your vision to perfection. Everything you need to succeed with every job, every project, every time. Visit us in store or online today at Koyman.bb. Koyman, everything you need to succeed.
Follow me to Q in the Community this Thursday. Q in the Community is sponsored by Banks Beer, Deputy, Guinness, Guinness Smooth, Dasani Water, Minute Maid Juice, Smirnoff Ice, Smirnoff Vodka, Johnny Walker, Black and White Whiskey, Barefoot Wines, Ryder Hard Wines, Pepsi, Juicy, 7-Up, White Rock Ginger Ale, White Rock Soda Water, Angostura White Oak Rum, and Fernandez Black Label Rum.
Some stories made us shake our heads. Others left us shocked.
The entire block, bordered by a section of St. Michael's Row and Bridge Street, was completely burnt out, taking along with it 7 businesses.
Some made us hold our breaths, think about who we are, or rethink how we live.
The advent of television, video, and other electronic entertainment and information devices has been accompanied by a loss in the reading and writing skills of many Barbadians.
But they all made us stop and listen, and want to get to the bottom of the issue.
The Problem Play Complex was originally scheduled to be opened in October last year, but that plan was frustrated by serious technical problems.
All these stories and more from the archives. Listen on Q100.7 FM Mondays and Fridays at 4:15 p.m.
That's the sound of your animals. Strong, healthy, and delivering yields you love. That didn't just happen. It began with you feeding them only the best. East Caribbean Feeds. Rest assured, we only produce your feeds with premium ingredients, no hormones, no animal byproducts, just everything your animal needs for maximum nutrition. Because your animals deserve only the best. East Caribbean Feeds from Maximum Nutrition.
ECGC Feeds are still here with better prices than before, with island-wide delivery available at Walk Springs Group Inc., St. Thomas, Bliss Variety Inc., Marchfield 6 Roads, St. Phillips, Feed Shed Constitution Van Stand. Telephone numbers 826-2168, 537-0089, and 851-1160.
And we're back. It's 9:34 here in Barbados and across the Eastern Caribbean. This is Let's Talk About It with a special focus on education. Before we return to our phone lines, I'll allow Mr. Adams to respond to the comments made by our previous caller.
Yes, I think she's been very informed. Very briefly, I want to say that when Mitchinson set up the grammar schools in Barbados, it was actually at a time of simmering disquiet and ill feeling in Barbados, because the black population had been deprived of any of the reparations money, and they had also, according to Hilary Beckles, had a landless emancipation. So in significant ways, they were even worse off after emancipation than before. They actually did make a petition for reparations, but they were saying that, go and know your place. So in fact, Mitchinson's establishment of the grammar school was not so much to elevate and promote the blacks economically, but to control them. And so the concept of the grammar school in Barbados was really as bastions of colonialism and social control rather than economic upliftment was there. And I think that is what the caller was trying to get through. Barbadians have never looked at it that way, because in 1876, the Mitchinson report came in 75, and there was this disquiet. And the major focus in the island at the time was not to allow insurrection, and indeed an insurrection did come. It was not a massive one, with the Confederation riots, because the Michelson and sided with the planters to try to ensure that the blacks were kept down. And so the education, therefore, the curriculum and the syllabus was more renowned for what it did not teach than what it actually taught. So that any semblance of technical vocational work was not included in the curriculum. Okay. And therefore, when blacks got in, and the blacks got in not so much because it was for them, but because their numbers were so overwhelming that the schools could not really function without taking in blacks. Okay. And when they did come, they had to get what you call a classical education, Latin and Greek and things of that nature, so that they were not able to participate in economic development. They became drawers of water and hewers of wood. And in many respects, that has pervaded the education system. And even right up to independence and after, I would just finish on this point, that when Charlie Best became the first principal of the community college, he made the point in an article in the Bajan magazine that it was amazing that after all these years of secondary education in Barbados, all of the engineers at Light and Power and at the telephone company and at Cable and Wireless, and even the middle management people there, technicians, were all imported into Barbados. And this was after 1966. So the extent of stymieing economic development was right there in that education system. But one last point, Michelson sided, in other words, Michelson did not side with the blacks. He sided with the planter class when he set up the school. And the planter class was adamant that the poor whites, the whites below their class, were not to sit in the same school as the upper class. And that is really the genesis of the first grade and second grade school in Barbados. Okay. So you had 3 first grade schools, Harrison College, Queen's College, and Lodge. All the other schools, including Combermere, were second grade schools. Later on, Combermere got a sixth form, largely because it had a white headmaster, really. And essentially, it maintained that hierarchy in the system, which bedevils the education system up to this present day. It is really an imposition, and it is not out of the genius of Barbadians. And I want to make that point.
Sure, definitely. We are learning a lot this morning, and as our discussion continues, we'll get to our discussion about contemporary education and education in Barbados' society today. But we want you to get in on our conversation also. We remind you, you can call us at 434-1007 or at 434-1070. And you can also send your WhatsApp messages to 434-1007. And speaking of WhatsApp, Rashid, I believe we have a number of individuals who are letting us know their opinion on education in Barbados.
Yes, Josh, and the first one that I'll read two. I'll read 2 right now because we have some callers that we'd like to get in. Excuse me. Good morning to you and your team. Thanks for sharing Mr. Adams with us. He's a living library. More of this information needs to be shared. And the second individual, very interesting discussion this morning, gentlemen. Your guest is making me believe more and more that we need education reform in 2024.
Indeed.
Oh, yes. Yes, I'm so happy to hear those 2 comments, because the reason why the education reform is being stalled is really, number one, Barbadians. I'm sorry to say that, but it's a fact. The historians tell us this, and as an educator we know it. our schools in Barbados over the years have never taught us the Barbadian history. In fact, if we were to visit, well, they're on vacation now, but there are several schools in Barbados where history is not taught at all. It's replaced by social studies. And even in the few schools where it is and history is taught, only a very limited number of students are involved. Now that is like committing suicide, because if you do not know where you come from in a way, you don't know where you're going. Now the history of the education is not really a pleasant one, and the more it has its pluses in a way, but the more you put the spotlight on it, the more a lot of unpleasant features are revealed. And you could say in biblical terms, it was I think it was the psalmist who said it was born in sin and reared in iniquity. And to some extent that is what you would find when you begin to dig down deep into it.
Okay, we return to our phone lines. Good morning, let's talk about it.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Greetings.
Greetings, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good morning to our listeners. I grew up in the 60s in the city of Bristol. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and I told him, you know that we used to make craft tracks and scooters and different things to play with without any tools. No spread level, no rulers, no drills, nothing. So we had the extra activities that all young people got today. So we had to make our own things, so to speak. But the point they were really getting, when they went to Wesley Hall School, I went through some guys at Air Form, but 1A1, they went on to 1A4. I didn't go right down. I had some challenges, right? But all of us went to St. Leonard's. And these same guys went from 1A1 at St. Leonard's to 5 arts, I think they would call it then. And I was wondering, right? These guys were sharp, they're still sharp. I wonder why they didn't get to go to the, as you call it, elite schools, Because at that time, our parents wasn't like about that sort of behavior. The more you get, that's took us to the school to sit the screen test, then go back home.
Yeah.
But those guys were very, very sharp.
Yeah.
And the school catered to the surrounding districts, like Ordings, Chapman Lane, the farm, Oshaw, Canton Village, and the surrounding areas, Green Partners and Lakeford Lane. And I always wonder, I didn't hear Mr. Adams talk about elite schools. I always wonder if back then, if those fellows like they now sitting those exams, how they would be, because these guys were very, 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 very bright.
Yes, thank you, sir. I am so pleased again with your insight. Number one, in terms of the school and what you might call technical vocational, as I mentioned before, the educators of the day, the people who ran Barbados education, they were all white. All of the headmasters of the old secondary schools came from England, and the majority of the teachers as well. And the director of education also came from England. And that was by design, because it was aimed to keep Barbados along a certain light. But what they did was to maintain that non-academic education or non-academic subjects who were not part of education, and therefore no technical vocational subject was allowed on the curriculum in the school. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that is indisputable. I want to give you a little give the Barbados really an insight into how technical vocational education came into Barbados. And this came about in the late 1950s when the then principal of Coleridge Parry, J.S. Yearwood, was on a sabbatical, and when he was in California, and he wrote a book on it, and John's School Days, he was upstairs looking down and observed groups of children, involved really in technical work. He had never seen children before in any school in Barbados. He himself was a classical scholar. He had never seen any school in Barbados where children were involved in using tools and being involved in technical education. And he was so taken up with it that when he asked the headmaster about it, and the headmaster told him that this was part of their curriculum. So when he got back to Barbados, he had to be debriefed by the United States ambassador who had funded his educational tour. And he relayed this experience to her with such excitement and so on. So she turned and said to him, "Mr. Yearwood, what would you like me then to do when I'm sending my report back to Washington?" And he said to her, "I would like to see technical vocational shops in our schools in Barbados." She contacted Washington, and it is as a result of that USAID funded all of the workshops that you see in our schools. And if you see their appendage to the schools, and if you visit them and observe them carefully, you will see the USAID sign on the wall. The point about that was that even when they were built, Barbados did not have the requisite teachers to teach the subjects, and they then had to send Barbadian teachers overseas to the United States, Australia, and places like that to come and man these workshops. But the workshops were not welcomed in the grammar schools, and there were several run-ins where the teachers and so on would not include the marks on the report cards and so on. So that you can see how it is that there is a gulf between academic education, which is deemed to be education, and technical vocational, especially in this day and age, when in order to pay our way in the world, we need to have that type of education. So I'm so happy that the gentleman brought that up.
Yes, and we appreciate his call and his contribution.
Yes.
It's 11 minutes away from 10, and we move on to our next caller. Good morning. Let's talk about it.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Go right ahead.
Yes, my name is Cyrus. I am a very proud alumnus of the Modern High School, and I'm also a former president of the Modern High School Old Scholars Association.
Thank you. Great.
And it is interesting that you should, Mr. What's his name? You're a gentleman there.
Adams.
Mr. Adams, the comments that he's making. And I lived through part of that. In fact, I sat the entrance examination, passed it, and then I went to the second examination. And in that second examination, they asked you things like, what did you do with the food that was left over the night before? Do you have a fridge? And those are the kind of questions. So that when the young lady said, what does all this got to do with my being here? And I then was sent to St. Leonard's for 1 year, and in the second year, I was transferred to the Modern High School with a scholarship. And it has always bothered me that we've got this two-tier system of education and many other things in Barbados, and very little is said about it, and even less is known about it. And then I think one of your guests there, made the comment, he who knows not where he comes from, knows not where he's going, and is destined to get there very quickly, since he doesn't know where he's going.
Yes.
And people know history are doomed to fail. But it's interesting, because if you look at Barbados, in spite of everything, we have been able to master our fate. In fact, I would say this of Mr. Lynch, and let me make an aside here. As recently as the last DLP government in Barbados, I had discussions with the then Minister of Education, Mr. Jones, with regards to A, the state of education on the island, and B, institutions, Mr. Lynch, should be recognized. We still not, we've recognized all kinds of people. I'm not saying that they didn't do anything, but I can say this. Number one, there's hardly a household in Barbados that was not influenced or impacted positively by the modern high school and the work of Mr. Lynch. Two, when fees were introduced into the new secondary set of secondary schools, Mr. Lynch, his fees were amongst the lowest, but more importantly, he went out and he sought out children who had abilities, and he encouraged them to come to the modern high school, and he gave them scholarships. I remember him being paid in eggs and sheep from the people out in the country who didn't have the money to pay the fees, and he would take the first payment, and he never took another payment after that, and the children came to school there until they graduated. And if you look at people like Dr. Esther Archer, a great pediatrician, you look at Dr. Chelston Brathwaite.
I was just going to call his name, actually.
Yes, there were people who made significant contributions. In fact, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, most of the physicians at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital were modern high school graduates.
Yes.
And many of the nurses.
Yes, I think you've made some significant points there, and this leads me on to the concept of the fees. Now, the all grammar school charge fees, and the fees at Harrison College and Lodge and Queen's College were quite prohibitive. You're talking about $24, $26 a term, and at Coleridge and Parry and Combermere and so on, it was something like $8.50 or so. Now, in the 1950s, when I actually went to Coleridge and Parry, that $8.50 was like $8,000. My mother, I was a single parent person. At one point I was with my father, but we went back to my mother. So my mother was a what you call a maid, a servant, cooking and living out, and working for very little. In fact, came home very seldom, because she wouldn't even have the bus fare to get home. So I was literally raised by my grandmother. But the point I want to make about the fees is this, that by the second or third week of each term, if you did not have that, if your fees were not paid, the porter messenger brought around, and I want Barbados to know this, and that is why the free second education was so good, although it had its flaws and so on. The porter messenger brought around a list of names to the form room and gave it to the master. In those days, the teachers were called masters, and he would say, like, luckily for me, I didn't have to have my name called, but he would say Adams AA, Ben D to C, and he would go down and down, usually about 6 people, and he said, get your bag and go to the office. And the point I'm making is that you were sent home in disgrace. The rest of the school at the Coleridge and Parry is a very long corridor, and when you're coming from down to the bottom of the corridor, right up with your bag and your books, and then you had to walk across the gap and down to Spicedown, and you couldn't come back to school unless you had that money. I just want to say that although I wasn't sent home, I could have been sent home, but my mother would run a meat in turn and keep pigs and so on, and try to get the money. But there were times, I know, when she didn't have the money, and she would send me from friends of hers to borrow the money to pay the fees. And if the friends didn't have the money, she would put on her clothes and go to the headmaster and explain to him her predicament. Maybe the pigs were not yet sold and so on. And so my name would be kept off the list. So I lived through what the gentleman is speaking about. And I think gentlemen like Louis Lynch and so on should I agree with him, should be given some recognition. If I have the time, I want to, he talked about exams. Now that exam was the 11 plus. Barbadians are of the belief that this exam is sacrosanct and that the world would come to an end if it was removed and so on. But the 11 plus is not a Barbadian construct at all. It is a colonial implant, and it has a most inglorious history because it was devised by a fraudulent psychologist called Cyril Burt, who claimed that he had done research to show that intelligence was inherited, genetically inherited, and that the environment, teaching and so on, would have nothing to do with it because it was fixed. And he went further and said that he had devised, he could devise a test at 11, around puberty, that would identify those students who had that ability, obviously the upper classes, and that the lower class persons and blacks had a ceiling beyond which their intelligence could not go. And therefore, the British brought in that 11 plus in 1944-45 with the 1945 Education Act. And the secondary modern school that was brought into Barbados came from England to Barbados because the working class English children had to go to those schools. And the English persons who were running Barbados education at the time introduced that here into Barbados. In fact, they told the politicians that that is what they should do. When it came under pressure in the mid-50s, late 1950s, as it was in Britain, the people here, the Barbadian people here, the parents, decided that their children were still going to inferior schools and they wanted them to go to the grammar schools. So the Barbados government brought the 11 plus into Barbados to say to the Barbadian public, because the Barbadians, as it was in Britain, the people here, the Barbadian people here, the parents, decided that their children were still going to inferior schools and they wanted them to go to the grammar schools. So the Barbados government brought the 11 plus into Barbados to say to the Barbadian public, because the Barbadian public would have been ignorant of the history and the genesis of the 11 plus, to say to them that here is this test. Once everybody sit this test, they cannot say now that they didn't have their chance. But a man called Kenneth Galbraith said, when he was speaking about trickle-down economics, that is like, it was like feeding good oats to a horse. And then when the horse, it goes through the alimentary canal and comes down and comes down to the thing, and then the blackbirds would feed on it at the bottom. So in fact, what it was saying is that the good schools were for the upper class and the other schools was for the thing. The other analogy is that it was the equivalent, since the middle classes found out what the 11 plus was like, the children were coached. We coach our children and so on for the exam. And then it is like having Usain Bolt and other thoroughbred athletes who were well trained and so on, ripe and ready for this exam. And then you have the other people that you just pick up and go to the exam, knowing full well that they're going to do badly. And it is, you can predict it. So from the time the 11 plus came to Barbados, it had its problems, and it got worse because the 11 plus is virtually owned by the middle class. If you go to the elite schools, you are not going to find any large numbers of working class children there. And if you go to large numbers of your secondary schools, you are not going to find any middle class children there. So the notion of equality is a fraud. and the economic development, which I want to speak about lately, the social and economic development of Barbados cannot go forward in the 21st century if it is stymied. In fact, it is like having a malignant colossus around your neck. You cannot thrive, because year after year, if the 11 plus results have not come out yet, when they come out, it will be the same thing as happened last year. The 10 bright students, and nobody is paying any regard to the others. But we'll talk about that later on.
Okay, and we thank our caller for his contribution. It's 1 minute past 10. We go to a quick commercial break. This is
National Insurance and Social Security Service. More than a contribution, it's your lifeline. Employees, employers, unemployed and pensioners, students and self-employed, we've got you covered.
Through all of life stages, from birth to seniority, learn all of your benefits at NIS.gov.bb.
National Insurance and Social Security Service. More than a contribution, it's your lifeline.
The National Insurance and Social Security Service. More than a contribution, it's your lifeline.
That's the sound of your animals. Strong, healthy, and delivering yields you love. That didn't just happen. It began with you feeding them only the best. East Caribbean Feeds. Rest assured, we only produce your feeds with premium ingredients. No hormones, no animal byproducts. Just everything your animal needs for maximum nutrition. Because your animals deserve only the best. East Caribbean Feeds from Maximum Nutrition.
ECGC Feeds are still here with better prices than before. With island-wide delivery available at Walk Springs Group Inc., St. Thomas. Oblis Variety Inc., Marchfield 6 Roads, St. Phillips. Feed Shed Constitution Van Stand. Telephone numbers 826-2168, 537-0089, and 851-1160.
It's finally here, Q100.7 FM listeners. We are on Instagram. Give us a follow on our new Instagram page at Q100.7 FM for more of your favorite radio station. Q100.7 FM, the heart of the community. Follow us.
Stay connected and stay entertained with MCTV. Make your MCTV payments on or before the last day of the month and never miss your favorite movies and shows. For your convenience, MCTV payments can be made online through the Bank of Nova Scotia, CIBC First Caribbean, the Royal Bank of Canada, First Citizens Bank, or SurePay online, or at any post office or SurePay location. You can also utilize our cashier or Dropbox facility located at our offices at CBC The Pine. MCTV, entertainment for everyone.
It's Let's Talk About It on Q100.7 FM. Our focus this morning is on the education system in Barbados. I have a WhatsApp contribution to read for our guest, Mr. Adams. Good morning, Sherwood and panel. A very interesting program. Mr. Adams is indeed a wealth of knowledge. I would like him to talk about the process of free secondary education in Barbados. There are some who would have us believe that this was done by the stroke of the pen of our first Prime Minister, but I have always seen it as a process and not an overnight change, as paid secondary schools played a key role in education here during the 50s and 60s through to the 70s. Can Mr. Adams please address this?
Yes, free secondary education was brought in, I think, in 1961 when the Democratic Labour Party won the election. I was about 18 years old or so at the time, just finishing school. And there were other schools in Barbados that I just mentioned. These were the secondary schools that children were going free. They at that time they were going from their feeder schools, Those children who, very few of them got into the other schools anyway, and they went into the feeder schools, the neo-secondary schools, Princess Margaret and St. Leonard's and so on. And in fact, in those days, you can say in a way, in inverted commas, that the neo-secondary schools were getting a better student than you're getting now with the 11 plus. But nonetheless, the abolition of the fees was much welcomed. I'm not going to overly criticize it, except to say that it now allowed, it was sold to the public as allowing people now to go to the elite schools without having to pay these exorbitant fees, and to that extent it was okay. But it did not fundamentally or essentially order the structure of the education system, and that is what should have happened afterwards, because you can do everything one time. But I would say the politicians from both parties were themselves product of the grammar schools, and it became extremely difficult for them. In fact, they were pressured by the elites in Barbados to make small changes in education, but at no cost should they touch the elite schools. And that is what has happened throughout the ages. So it is not so much a criticism of the free education, but it is a reluctance to radically reform the system that came about. Because what happened, you might know, is that as soon as the middle class got to find out the ins and out of the 11 plus, they immediately set about to get their children in line to get to the schools. The other working class people in Barbados were not fully apprised and aware of what was going on. In fact, they were in a way ignorant of what was going on, and so they bought into the idea that their children had the chance of going to the other schools, which some of them did. But increasingly over the years, as early as 1973, they had to have in Barbados a Shorey report, Dr. Leonard Shorey, because it was shown then that the fame that Barbados had of producing literate children from the primary school was already being dampened and hampered by 1973. And the Shorey report called for the abolition of the 11 plus as early as 1973. Indeed, in 1969, there was the middle classes were already fighting to get their children into these schools. And there's an interesting debate that went on in the House of Assembly that you youngsters should research. And it came about because Reverend Hatch, I can call his name, and because it's in Hansard, his son got the highest mark in the 11 plus. In those days, what the research in Hansard said, that there were 10,000 students who sat the part 1 of the 11 plus exam. Over 7,000 of those students, were eliminated. About 2,300 of them sat part 2. And the reason for the part 2 was to select 750 students out of the 10,000 overall for the grammar schools. The grammar schools were still small and all of them combined could only take 750 students. So the 11 plus was not about equality. The 11 plus always and still remain to allow the grammar schools to take all of the top performers in the 11 plus, and the other schools become what the literature calls, not me, dumping grounds for failures. And this has been known now by young people as the years go by. Earlier on, young people were accepting this, because they were told, it is the working class that is told that it doesn't matter where they go to school, but the middle class will move heaven and earth to get their child in the grammar school. So working class people began to believe that it was all right for their children, or that he passed for this school. But somebody asked the question, have you ever seen a middle class parent who, when he got the results from the 11 plus, and the child did not get the marks for an elite school, did you ever see him pat him on the head and tell him, oh, you've got what you deserve? He doesn't do that. He runs to the headmaster of the grammar school and asks him to take him. And 9 out of 10 times that is what happens, whether he has passed the exam or not. And what Barbadians need to know, up to when I became headmaster of St. Leonard's, the 11 plus came out, and traditionally the headmasters of the grammar schools went into the ministry and got their children first. It is known, head teachers that were there before me, Mr. I don't recall his name, he's dead, Mr. Ewart told me, that Mr. Hammond and others from those schools went into the thing, and they also went with a list. The Barbadians should know this. They went with a list of children of a certain class, and they went in, picked out all the top students, plus the list that they had, and they walked out, went off to their thing, and then those of us who were head teachers of the newer secondary schools, we then got the rest. And that happens up to this present day. The only thing happens now is that they send the list to the school. But the system operates on the basis that the older secondary schools, the grammar schools, get all of the children with the top marks. And that, I will speak later on, is the genesis of the social dislocation in Barbados and economic stagnation. We'll talk about that later on.
Okay, we return to our phone lines. It's 13 minutes past 10. Good morning. Let's talk about it.
A very good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Adams.
Thank you. Good morning.
Right. It's just some profound regret that I'm going to refute quite a bit of what you've said.
You will try to do it. But go ahead.
Yes. No, sir. I said, in my estimation, I will refute. Yes. You can say I will try. But let me start out by saying you've spoke a lot of history, and in fairness to the discussion, I'm going to give my bit of history and my finding.
Go ahead.
No, I am
No.
What's that?
No, Mr. Adams did not spout anything. He presented his well-researched knowledge on education in Barbados.
Okay,
nothing that I said can be disputed factually.
Okay, I'm not going to have any acrimony.
Okay.
I'm saying to you, sir, respectfully, you and I have spoken quite a bit over time. I'm saying to you, sir, let us go back. You're talking about history, and I'm satisfied to say that we've come out of a colonial past where there was the colonial officer, if you wanted a commissioner of police, a matron, hospital, whatever, they had to be sent. And we had the social revolutionization of our country by Mr. Elbar, who says, Mr. Adams, come here and do this. Miss Ann, come here and matron. And that transpired without a drop of blood being shed. And when it was realized, person said how he got this done, and not a drop of blood, but it was socially revolutionized, and the colonial office became history. 1, 2. I'm satisfied to say that the 11 plus and the screening test and all that you've got, you are saying that it is out of the colonial whatever, and then you cited in 19, you said somewhere about the Cable and Wireless persons came in, and up to then it lingered, and they still have people coming in to do certain jobs. I am satisfied that as we speak, all and sundry in Barbados has got an equal chance with capacity and qualification, that all of that old thing that we were talking about from the 50s and 60s now passed. 1, 2, going into 3. I am not going to sit here and allow it to be believed that we have a system that you take in. How are you going to prove you got a cadre of children, say 3,000 children. You've got to find out who is with capacity, what one will say a high flyer. However you test those 3,000 children, you're going to come out with a certain set of children with a certain high number. If you try them over 1,000 times, those same set keep coming out all the time. The emphasis has got to be laid on the remaining children. All the money that the Ministry of Education is going to expend should be expended in the catering to the remaining of those children with all passion, concern, and vigilance. That is where the problem lies. Now, in 1973,
just a minute.
I've got a lot to say. You want to cut in and say, and I'll come back on.
Yes, you've exposed your views. Let's allow.
No, not all.
Let Mr. Adams respond, and they'll.
Mr. Adams, know who you're speaking to?
Yes, I know. You see, the statistics do not support you. The statistics in Barbados are shown. I mentioned from the Shorey report.
Yes.
It also show consultants who came here from Britain and did a 7-year study.
Yeah.
It also shows from Dr. Obida from the University of the West Indies.
Yeah.
All of that have shown that as a result of segregating children at 11. Listen, you would have to let me speak.
No, I haven't said anything, just
yes, all of that have shown that from the time you brought the 11 plus and the primary schools began to segregate children almost from the time they came into the primary schools, it has been a certain class of Barbados population that have really benefited tremendously from the placement of children into the secondary schools. And I will bring some statistics later on to indicate indicate that, including the government white paper, including the 11 plus results of this year, and even if you go to the CXC, you will find the same thing, which just came out in the newspaper if you read it. And you will find that when you look at who those students are, they are the students of the middle class. And that has been so from in England. In fact, the English abolished the 11 plus because it became so unpopular and untenable. The trade unions, the parents in the United Kingdom, the teachers in the United Kingdom, all of the stakeholders in education, this is where it actually came from. They found that it was so detrimental to the social and economic development of England that they rose up against it. And if you want to do some research, you could go and research 2 outstanding reports in the UK. One is called the Robbins Report. And the Robbins Report indicated that the British, by 1963, had fallen behind the economic giants in the world, the industrial countries. And the British were very concerned as to why that was happening. So they set up Lord Robbins, and what Lord Robbins found, that it was a result of the outdated education system, which was England was the only industrial country in the whole world that maintained that system of segregating students at 11. The Scandinavian countries did not do it. Germany did not do it. France did not do it. Canada did not do it. New Zealand did not do it. And having gone all over the world and found that that was the case, Lord Robbins suggested that there was a wastage of talent among the working class children in Britain, and that the British government, as soon as possible, should abolish the 11 plus and allow students of mixed ability to be in the schools like the other industrial countries. And then the Plowden report. I hope you're writing these down.
No, I'm going to get it. Don't worry.
It's all there. It's all there on the net. That is a good thing for the net. And then the Plowden report, which was the most comprehensive report, children and their primary schools. it eviscerated the concept of the 11 plus and demanded, it showed in fact that every single year 60,000 students were misplaced as a result of the 11 plus. The notion that you were talking about high flyers and low flyers and all that sort of thing, 60,000 students every single year during the 1960s were misplaced. That is, students that were put in the newer secondary schools to languish there. They, many of them had the ability to go on into the schools. As a result of that, the English abolish the 11 plus. And let me tell you something that will, I hope, probably close your mouth. You had,
I wouldn't.
Listen carefully. You had the principal, I have to speak plainly to Barbados, the principal of Erdiston College claimed recently that every country that abolished the 11 plus, that the standard of education went down. I think he should apologize to the Barbadian public. We also had a gentleman, Webster, from who said he worked at the Caribbean Development Bank. He should listen to the president of the bank. He also claimed that he had some information that is not so. I have information with me now, and I can share this with the Barbadian public to show that at the height of the 11 plus, only 9 to 10% of students in England went on to the grammar schools and got 5 or more O levels. 10%. You know what it is today with the abolition of the 11 plus. Every single year after the 11 plus, and I have the statistics here with me. And the GCSE results just came out in Britain yesterday. And it is being praised to high heavens. Because the percentage of students in Britain getting 5 or more levels is all up in the 80s. Which shows that the 11 plus, all of the grandiose claims, not a single claim that has been made for the 11 plus in Barbados or in England where it comes from has ever been proven. In fact, one of the researchers in England said that have no evidence whatsoever to prove that there was equality and that students will do better. That what the proponents of the 11 plus have resorted to is ignorance masquerading as wisdom. And that is what is happening in Barbados right now.
My response to what you have said now?
My
turn?
Go ahead.
Okay.
If you bring the facts.
Okay, sir. My take is, you are speaking about persons. I am saying to you, I know about 3 families right now I could put my finger on that. You know, there's a Bajan saying, if your grandma or your grandfather come back, if one particular family grandfather come back, there are 5 members of that family, doctors, 5 ordinary people, and that man was the brightest in his class, 7th standard at St. George Boys School in the day. His grandfather those children's grandfather was the brightest in the class at that time. I am saying that's one. I could call about 3 and a prominent person. Wait a minute, please. A prominent person in Barbados right now is a doctor. Same simple upbringing and thing. You want to say
Raul, that is not saying anything. I could use myself as an example because I went to primary school barefooted. My mother couldn't pay, had to borrow to pay school fees and all that sort of thing. And look where I am, and look where my children are, and so on. But that does not detract from the significant fact of national development. Now, let me tell you what was written to me from Britain recently. Dear Alwyn, there's a full article dealing with GCSE. A study reviewed the GCSE results for nearly 500,000 pupils and found that higher attaining pupils living in grammar schools areas were 10% less likely to achieve 5 or more A levels and equivalent to the comprehensive schools in Britain. Now, we don't have any comprehensive schools in Barbados, but this is current reform. This is current information. I can later in the program bring statistics from Barbados, because what has happened is that the statistics are there. They are shoved under the carpet. If the public got to know the real import of these statistics year after year, there will almost be a rebellion in the country.
Okay, it's 25 minutes past 10. We go to our next caller. Good morning. Let's talk about it.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
I want to, first of all, say thanks to the headmaster who's on air and bringing this level of history to us. But I want to ask him a question.
Yes, sir.
You were the headmaster of Coleridge and Parry at one stage, right?
Yes, sir.
You investigating your style as a headmaster. I don't know if you remember, because you talk about the system and all the atrocities that were committed against education and certainly students and stuff because of the choice and the policies in place. But you recall sending home students on many occasions for getting to school late.
You want to end there?
Well, I want to continue. I want to continue. Okay. Ending. I want to say first of all, on the claim one, that there were liming in the bus terminals.
Yes.
That was the claim, and that there were representatives from the Ministry of Education who were then taking pictures and sending them on to you about these students liming. That's one.
Yeah.
Hold on. The second tier of this, the second tier for me is this. There was also the reality that when students miss the 7 o'clock bus in the morning, when they miss it, sometimes not because they actually missed it, but because that bus never came. And by the time the 8 o'clock bus came there, the 8 o'clock bus was full of people from all over the place. So by the time it got to the terminal, the students could not even get onto that bus. Now, I ain't talking what I don't know. I'm telling you what I know. So I want to ask you this question. When you send home a child for a day or two for coming late, don't you think that a different approach, because you have now cheated that child of a day of education. That's what you've done. You've now cheated that child of a day of education. So you come on here, I mean, your history is great, you sound glorious and everything, but there were certain imperfections that you guys as headmasters back in the day did not look at, because you obviously were not trained to handle them different. I would tend to think,
Sir,
you had the whole morning.
Just a second.
I think you seem to be getting personal. Let me tell you what. Let me speak to the public though. You want to give the public the impression that I probably was the demon and so on. In the first place, it is the same 11 plus that we are discussing that was causing those children to be coming from Silver Sands and elsewhere down to St. Peter to school, and coming to school late virtually every morning. If the authorities and the parents in Barbados believe that they should condone that, then they should make arrangements for the students to come to school early. So let me tell you what is the real gist of this matter. That lateness is the first sign of indiscipline in a school. The first sign. And therefore, if students are coming to school late and the parents are apprised of the fact that they're coming to school late, then the onus is on the children to get the children to school early. Now let me tell you something about education. Education is about productivity and economics. If you have a school where large numbers of students are coming to school late every day, which is a common thing in Barbados, those children are interrupting the lessons in the form rooms every single day on a continuous basis, all up to between 9:30 and 11 o'clock. Now, it is not so much that they themselves has missed education. They are interrupting the education of 30 other students. Now, in the law of productivity, it is not only the 2 or 3 minutes of the disruption that you have to count, you have to multiply that by the 30 students that are in the class. So it's 90 minutes of productivity. And therefore, if you are a principal of a school and you want to claim of not knowing how to deal with children and so on, the principal of the school, somebody in the school has to make the decisions, and the decision of the school is to come to school early. Now, I went to Canada on an educational tour with the ministry, sent by the Ministry of Education. We went to Nova Scotia, and what we found there, Miss Denny was with me, Dr. Butcher, a number of other people. What we found when we got to Canada, this is an industrial country with a top level education. The school that we visited, and then afterwards I visited several schools in Toronto, we found that there was not a single child coming to school late in that school, because the children were coming from their location, and the school buses brought the children to school 20 and 15 minutes before the school started. And that is because they do not have this outrageous system that we have, where children, somebody in authority can decide that a child in Christchurch is to go to school in St. James, and a child in St. James is to go to school in St. Andrew, which is absolute madness and stupidity. And not only that, these students are let loose on the road on ZRs and minibuses. And all of the talk that you're speaking about treating children badly or so, you can imagine anything worse than having a child on a ZR van. It is a disgrace that the authorities and parents and even people in Barbados that come on the radio to speaking about children's rights, you never hear them speaking about this situation that we have in Barbados, which is fundamentally a problem in the school system. And therefore, I make no apology at all, because before I know, let me tell you what run a school. There's natural justice, there, which I think you might know. There's something called duty of care, and there's a third one that comes to my mind. And those are the areas in which I ran the school. So before the child would be sent back home, the child is not expelled. The child is sent back home because the parent was notified that it is the parent's duty to get the child to school. And the parent should be making a hell of a noise to ensure that their students do not have to crisscross Barbados to go to a school that the parents don't even know anything about the school. I have spoken to parents in Silver Sands to come to the school about late coming, if you want to be specific, and say, Mr. Adams, how you expect me to get down there? The parent themselves don't even know where the school is. But somebody in the ministry could send the child from Silver Sands down to Curzon Parish School. And that is the kind of thing that you ought to look at. And what you are finding as a result of that is social dislocation, where you can't leave your house at night. That is a result of the school system, a direct result of the school system. And what you should be thinking about is the productivity, the economic productivity of this country, which is economically kind of not, it is going up now, but for the last 30 or so years, it was anemic. And it is anemic because the 70% of our students, based on statistics from the Ministry of Education, are leaving schools without certification. Over 70% every single year. It is probably 80% by now. And they leave without certification or without any meaningful skill to function in this modern day economy. And that, sir, is what you ought to look at, and not condone late coming in school. Thank you.
Okay, 25 minutes away from 11, we move on to our next caller. This is Let's Talk About It. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm great, Mr. Adams, how are you, sir?
Oh, very well, please.
Mr. Adams, I tell you, talking some things here, you're so right. Wrong on this other call can't got nothing to do with you. because you just mentioned something about.
But listen, I haven't thrown all the statistics that I have at them yet.
I tell you, you're saying that. You just mentioned about Nova Scotia.
Yes.
And I live in Nova Scotia for a little while. And I used to murder education system.
Yeah, the school I went to was Horton School, one of the highest the technological schools in Canada.
Yeah. But the major thing with that education system is that they will allow all the children to go to school first in the morning, and they will come off later. They will come off first in the evening, so they will go to school early. So when the younger children come, they could take care of the younger children.
Yes.
And the same thing when they go home now for the evening, the older people, so that when the children get home, they'll be there to take care of the children. It was so amazing, man. I tell you. But I hear you talking a lot. But what you know about the feeder system?
Yes, the feeder system. I worked in the feeder system. I started to work in 1961 at St. Albans, a very nice primary school, certainly in those days. And then I was taken from there to St. Leonard's because there were so many students trying to get into the grammar schools were so small and could not take children that the Barbadian parents wanted their children in school. They didn't want them at home. They didn't want them to get pregnant and all this kind of thing. And they flooded the two St. Leonard schools with applicants. So in 1962, the St. Leonard's Girls' School had over 1,700 students for entry in the school, and the boys' school over 1,500. Those children came essentially from around Eagle Hall and St. Stephen's and so on, but from other parts of Barbados as well once they had room. But so many people wanted to get in. And what they decided to do in order to help the situation was to have a shift system, which you kind of just mentioned in a way. So the shift system worked. When I got to the school, they were discussing it before the school opened for September. And the idea was that students would come to school from 8 in the morning till 12. Then they get a break and so on. Then they would go off, and students would come in from 1 till 5. And then, as I was speaking before, there were so many students who were bright who did not get into, well, all students are bright in a way, but a lot of academically bright students did not get into the grammar schools. In fact, I was the only student from Black Bess School that went to Corrigan Parry, and the headmaster kind of worked that out. But there were so many students in my class that could have gone. But the point I was making is that the headmaster, Mr. Griffith, Dayton Griffith, the school is named after him up the road, he decided that he would try to keep on the students who were doing well academically, because by law they could not do exams. When these schools were set up, these were set up, the name that were given to these schools were glorified primary schools. And a governor of the central bank in the 30th anniversary book of Barbados, when he was writing about education, he praised the grammar schools that he attended and so on, but he referred to the neuro-secondary schools in Barbados, and I quote from my head, as centers of institutionalized mediocrity. That is the condescending and disgusting manner in which he described those schools. And there are people in Barbados today that would describe them that way too.
Yeah.
And they have the majority of the students in Barbados. And therefore, if we want to pay our way in the world, we have to have good schools all across Barbados for those students. But let me finish about what happened then. So you had the headmaster then got the government to build on at St. Leonard's what they call A block. And the A block allowed students, those particular students, to come from 9 to 3. So we had 3 sets of students coming to St. Leonard's in those days. I was working there up to 1965 before I went abroad to England. The 8 to 12, the 1 to 5, and the 9 to 3. And those schools should be applauded. But far from that, according to the Rastafarians, they are down-pressed. They have never been given their due accord and respect in the country. And the students who go there, the reports, the government has 2 reports from the criminal justice and so on, where the students from those schools, when they were interviewed, lamented the treatment that they have gotten. And notwithstanding what Raul was saying, the students said that their plight is directly related to the 11 plus, and that they have been designated to what they call bad schools. And even when they are successful, even when they go to the so-called bad schools and do well, they are not even recognized. That is in the reports, and any person from the government, from the minister back down, can come. And I believe, to be honest with you, that is why the Prime Minister is very astute. And with that report in her hand, she could not continue to support this kind of system that we have in Barbados that goes back to the 19th century.
Yes, Mr. Adams. Let me tell you my feeder system situation. But before we go there, I think the government make a mistake when they shut down the elite bus companies. Should pass those buses on to the schools and let schools run their own bus system. Get the children from school into school. I think that was a big mistake there.
Yeah, you were on long enough, but let me tell you that would not have done anything to it, because what essentially has happened is that the structure of the system is wrong, and no amount of tinkering with it will rectify it. That is what Drucker, who is the guru in management, said, that if you have an organization that is structurally flawed, that no amount of management and tinkering will improve it unless the structure is changed. And that is the issue that the government has to do. The structure, it is structurally flawed.
Yeah, I think so. But let me tell you quick, because I want to get less from what's going.
Yes.
When I was going to school here in St. George Secondary School built in around 1970.
Yes.
My 11 plus exam that I did was to which form I would go into at St. George Secondary. Because automatically you go there.
Yes.
So my marks I would get was if I go to A form or B form or C form.
Yes.
And that was basically, I thought that was the feeder system. I thought that was really the feeder system. All the primary schools in St. George would have feed children to the St. George Secondary School.
That is correct. You are right. Yes. Yes. That is the feeder system. That is what happened at St. Leonard's School, St. Stephen's and Eagle Hall and those schools.
Yeah. And when you think about children going to school at 3 years, those people should go back to 5. Maybe we were better people. Maybe we was going to school at 5. I will put that listen to you, sir.
Okay, thank you for your contribution.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so we go to commercial break. This is Let's Talk About It.
Tired of the hassle of collecting your hardware supplies? Make your life easier with Koiman. Do you need to place an order for collection or delivery? Simply call our new dedicated order number at 539-7777. We deliver island-wide, making sure you get what you need when you need it. No more stress, no more rush. Just call 539-7777 and let Koiman handle the rest. Koiman, everything you need to succeed.
Join Apostle David Durant and the team from Restoration Ministries International every Saturday at 12 noon for Restoration Inspiration on Q100.7 FM. God is restoring all things. He is refreshing the saints and reviving the nations. Restoration Inspiration, putting some inspiration into your Saturdays.
Don't miss some of the biggest stories of your day every day at 1 p.m. in the CBC News World at 1. That's when CBC News highlights what happened and what you need to know. Listen in every day thanks to our partners, the National Insurance and Social Security Services, Nichols Bacon Company, Laurie Dash Craft Shop, and Great Health Works. The CBC News World at 1, credible and relevant across the stations of the CBC.
And we're back. It's 15 minutes away from 11. This is Let's Talk About It with a special focus on education this morning. We return to our phone lines. Good morning. Good morning, caller.
Yes, hi, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Kamal.
Good morning to you. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How about you, Kamal?
Glad to hear that we'll come out here with blessings. With your mother blessings to bless me with your presence. Your mother myself, because all my blessings come from you. Because who shall bless some man curses?
Yes, go ahead with your question, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning to you. It's good to hear from you. You're a wealth of knowledge. You're a tower and pillar of strength and education. I really appreciate it. Yes, I have about 3 questions this morning for the panel, for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my first question has to do with the aspect of, and I would have been a proud, student of the Commonwealth Secondary School.
Yes.
And I would have excelled in the arts.
Yeah.
I would have had a bronze at NIFCO for my piece of tribute to Hussein.
Yes, sir.
And my first question would have to be, what are your views on the aspect on having tourism education for our students who may be slightly deficient, knowing that we do not have a national stadium or we don't have the ability to really get that athletic part of the school curriculum going. What about traveling overseas in this critical and crucial time of being 13 to 15, 16 to 19 and so on, so that they're able to at least get some sort of solution and then come back here and do well as they go on to education. What are your views on that? As I have another question when I finish, please.
Yeah, well, that is a matter of curriculum reform inside the school itself. The ministry itself could get involved, but it is not the best thing in the world for the ministry to be involved in the minute details of the curriculum in every school. But there are certainly some schools that can arrange their curriculum to accommodate activities and subjects such as those, because they are crucial to the economy of the country. And I was glad to hear you mention the arts, music and drawings and art and things of that nature, because in some respects they are underrepresented in schools. Sometimes our primary schools concentrate so much on the 11 plus that those activities that really help to develop the various skills and abilities of our students are neglected. And I believe that in the area of education reform, that special attention should be paid to those areas of the curriculum, so that every child in the primary school would have a minimum number of hours in dealing with those areas, because those are the areas that in a way really help the students to develop academically. And therefore I would agree with you to some extent.
Well, thank you very much. My second question before my last one. My second question is interesting that you mentioned the arts, Mr. Adams, and I was wondering if what are your thoughts on, in addition to the 11 plus exam, that when they get to CA that they're tested again, that coming to the content issues.
Well, I am not in favor of the 11 plus at all.
Oh, good.
For the various reasons that I gave. There's absolutely no justification for it. I know the government is having some problems in getting it abolished, but I would look into that a little bit later. But in terms of the 16-year-olds, I believe that students can go to school to 18, irrespective of whether they're doing sixth form work or not. So I believe that as part of the education reform, that the school leaving age should be moved up to 18, and this would help students who perhaps were not as fast academically as others, and it might also help students to remain at school and get involved in certain activities that they were not able to do while they were doing certain academic subjects. So I believe that we should really look towards having students go, given the option of going to school until all the students are 18 and not necessarily 16.
Yes. Thanks. My final question is a two-part question. It has to do with the morning and the evening you would have mentioned that there was a deficiency in the school system based on the buses. And the first part of my question has to do with the aspect of getting the students to school and from school on an educational bus where their teachers, instead of nowhere, they have that terrible music and the ZR culture. How about having a culture of education going to school and from school? And the part B to that question is, in addition to prayers on mornings, what about a debriefing with parents and students on evenings? Dedicated half an hour to presentations of students to the parents, showing them what they would have done in the schools in the beginning. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Okay, Gamal.
Fairly good idea. I think that in terms of the assembly, I am a firm believer in the assembly for a lot of reasons. I can't go into them now, but it brings the esprit, the core of the school. It helps students to identify with the school. You see them in their uniform and so on. I believe in uniforms. I am not a firm believer in the new hairstyles. I believe that should be left to the principals. I do not think that children should be given carte blanche to wear their hair.
Why left the respective principals of each school as opposed to a standardized system across the board?
Well, because when you mandate that you can do whatever you want to do, it's a different thing. If there was a specific situation at the school, and the parents and the teachers and the headmaster have decided that this is what they would tend to do, then I would go there. But I believe there is a very good reason for having the uniform system in Barbados, and the way that students should go to school neat, and so on. Yeah.
Okay, we have a number of WhatsApp messages which we'll read for you as we want to engage all our contributors. Rashid?
Yes, Josh, we have, as you said, a number of WhatsApp messages. I'm trying to group them by theme here. We have two individuals so far speaking of zoning. One of them says, "It is a relief to hear Mr. Adams speak about this, as they call it, child planting. I thought zoning was supposed to be a factor in Barbados. I am peeved. From the time my son knew he had to sit the 11+ exam, his only choice of school was the St. Michael's School, not because of any status, but because he lives 6 minutes away from the school. He was looking forward to not taking the ZR vans anymore. We put St. Michael's, well, the parent put St. Michael's as the first choice, but he was allocated to the foundation school. I applied for a transfer and was denied. So what are parents to do? Just accept that what is more important is the number of high-end cars pulling up at the school on mornings? I thought practicality was what Barbados was aiming for."
Yes, I want to be frank though. what the parent just mentioned there, in relation to the system, is in any other country other than Barbados would be high-class madness or foolishness. You can imagine that as a result of a one-shot arbitrary exam, a child that lives 6 minutes from St. Michael's School,
2 subjects,
and 2 subjects, is sent to foundation school. With all, and foundation school, I'm not saying it's a bad school or anything, but we should have all good schools. I taught at foundation school. I think I have a pretty good reputation and so on, teaching there. But that is out of order. And I only recently, well, twice really, but only a couple of days ago, I met, you can call her name, Stacey Cummins, a young lady called Stacey Cummins. She's writing some books and so on, and she was into acting and etc. She did go to CP school while I was the headmaster. And I was amazed when the mother came to PTA meetings and so on, because I had taught her sister. They lived next door to foundation school. Her sister. I taught her sister at foundation. At Courage and Parry, and the mother is in front of me with Stacey at the school. To be honest with you, her mother was a model person, and Stacey, though coming from next to foundation, got to school early, which is the same thing that whoever it is that is starting that madness about lateness just now. And so she ended up doing quite well. And at the school, I tried, I would say, well, but the teachers, we tried to promote music and art and so on. And so she excelled in that area and did very well. But similar to what the gentleman is saying, he's living next door to St. Michael's School. And 1.5 marks or some stupid thing like that, or some official somewhere or computer somewhere, is to transplant the child up to foundation school. And that is out of order, and it is really causing a heavy degree of divisiveness in the country. And sometimes students who want to get involved in extracurricular activities. I had a child at CP called Keisha Esprit. We are very great friends. She is now in North Carolina. And she came to the school from a parish way out. And she didn't even know where the school was. And she cried and so on. But after she got to the school, by the time she got to probably 4th form, it is only then that she started to got involved in extracurricular activities, which was athletics. And she was the premier athlete in Barbados. If you check the thing, you'll find. And she got a scholarship and so on. But I'm saying, if she had gone to a school, I'm not saying that we didn't accept her, but had she gone to a school in her vicinity, she would have been identified a lot earlier in the regard. We also had students from St. Philip coming down to St. Peter who were cricketers next door to Lord School or Princess Margaret. And those boys had to sleep at Courage Parry. They were cricketers. They would sleep at Courage Parry on Friday nights. And Pedro Hines would carry breakfast and so on for them, so that they would be ready, because they were poor students the next day. So I mean, those are just things that I mentioned in passing. But the whole principle of the idea is an extremely outrageous one. And the fact, too, is that same 11 plus had nothing to do with the Barbadian genius. And that 11 plus was set, the Barbadian public should know this, it was not even set in Barbados, That 11 plus originally was set in Murray House all up to the 1990s. There's a place in Scotland that specializes in exams, and they were setting exams for our 11-year-olds with all of the brilliant people that we have in Barbados. They were setting, they knew nothing about our students, and they care less, but they were setting exams in Scotland for the 11 plus in Barbados, so that 750 students could go to an elite school. And that is something that Barbados has to wake up. We have to wake up and recognize that the country cannot any longer maintain its place in the world if we have an education system that is bedded and wedded in the 19th century, because it had this ceiling of ability and so on. It was certainly out of order. But the reason for it, though, when you come down to the nitty-gritty, apart from the educational nonsense that Bert had said, when you come down to it, the reason why the students are not performing in those two subjects, which is really the reason for primary schools. Primary schools are to send out literate children. I'm going to read something from Dr. Shuri and so on in a minute. That from the time the 11 plus came into Barbados, the primary schools came to the conclusion, and people don't want to say this in public, but I'm going to say it because I'm 81 years old and so on, that their role in education in Barbados is to produce students for the elite schools. That is what the role of the grammar school has turned out to be. And it is heavily publicized when the results of the 11 plus come out. 4,000 or so students might sit the exam, but on the television, I'm not saying that I'm against highlighting the students, but on the television you would think that there's the second coming of Christ. All sorts of things are done for 10 students, and the thousands of students who have not performed well are thrown to the wolves. Now, let me, before you go to the advert, this is what Douglas Lynch was a businessman, and you would find that Mr. Bino from A1 supermarket is also following in his footsteps. because what Douglas Lynch, who was the head of the biggest private company in Barbados, what he really found out, and people would surprise that he did that, he found out that if you have an education system that are not producing students that are literate and doing well and so on, that it will affect his business. So he did some research, and this is the disturbing facts that he found. He found, for example, that there were, this was 1988, this is, I'm reading, I have it in my head too, that there were more than 580 students out of over 2,000 girls, and that 2 out of every 10 was not proficient in English. But when he came to the boys, he found that it was even worse, that there were 1,140 boys out of 2,600. That is almost half of the boys who sat the English exam and who could not reasonably read and write at age 11. Now that was in 1988. Barbadians, you know, would be surprised that this information had to be disseminated by Douglas Lynch. But this should be information that the general public should know. And he's saying that overall there were about 1,180 girls and about 1,490 boys, that is 1,500 boys, who were functionally illiterate in a numerate world. That is in Barbados, with an 11 plus that was brought into Barbados with all the fanfare, saying that it would revolutionize education in Barbados, when indeed, before the 11 plus came to Barbados, the Barbadian primary schools were known across the world, certainly across the Caribbean, for sending out literate and numerate children. So there is no way that the education system can be improved without the elimination of the 11 plus.
Okay, bear with us, callers. We take a quick commercial break, and when we return, we'll engage you on our all-important discussion on education. Stay with us.
Great news! Q in the Community returns to London on September the 21st. This Q will occur in the Oakington Manor, Wembley. It begins at 2 p.m. If you're going to be in London, don't miss out on this, and of course we encourage you to tell your family and friends all about it. You can get your tickets now at qlondon24.eventbrite, that is eventbrite.co.uk. Q London, supporting the Hope Foundation and Hampers for Barbados.
Hey Q family, this is your boy DJ King Scorpion,
Saturday night,
the king of oldies.
headed out on the highway.
Now I want you to join me on Q 100.7 FM every Saturday from 3 p.m. until 8 p.m. The vibes will be nice, the music will be sweet from the sugar bike with Saturday sweetness right here on Q 100.7 FM. Get up, good.
Here is an important message from the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training for students who previously applied to enter sixth form at one of our sixth form schools. If you were unable to submit your full list of CXC qualifications with your initial application, please resubmit the forms before Tuesday, August 27th. The Ministry apologizes for any inconvenience caused.
Wake up! Wake up! Wake up with Mark Anthony every Saturday and Sunday morning from 5 to 9 a.m. on Q 100.7 FM. He'll give you your daily dose of inspirational music and those soothing tunes to get you through the weekend. Start your weekends the right way with Mark Anthony on Q 100.7 FM. QFM, the heart of the community.
Every Monday Monday at 11 a.m., learn about how the Queen Elizabeth Hospital works and how to make it work for you on Q. From the A&E to the ICU, NCDs to CPR, the QEH Pulse radio show is about your hospital and your health. Join communications specialist Shane Seeley and specially invited medical professionals as they provide vital health information, answer your questions, and address your concerns live. The QEH Pulse Radio Show, every Monday from 11 a.m. until noon on Q 100.7 FM. The QEH connects with you on Q.
It's 6 minutes past 11 here in Barbados and across the Eastern Caribbean. This is Let's Talk About It with our special guest this morning, Mr. Alwyn Adams, and we're talking all things related to education. So we return to our phone lines because we go up until 11:30. So we want to get as many callers in as possible. Good morning. Let's talk about it.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I was listening earlier to a lady that was speaking about the difficulties of certain children getting into secondary schools. I went to school at St. Ambrose. I'm 80 years old. I went to school at St. Ambrose in 1955. We sat the common entrance exam. It was in two-part at your school. You didn't go nowhere. Stay at the school. And I passed for St. Michael's School.
Yeah.
But due to having a father that was no good, wouldn't work, my mother could not afford to pay for me for the education. I had to remain at St. Ambrose School. One day, years down the line now, I joined the NUPW and was there, and I was the ground staff secretary. And a gentleman saw me, and he watching what I writing when the people are speaking and what's not. And after he said, you know, you have more education than to be a maid. I was a maid at UH. I said, well, boy, I told him my problem. And he took me to Marine House, and I sat the housekeeping course. I came out on top.
Yeah.
I was called into housekeeping, and I think it's 201, and I was housekeeper. But he said to me, why didn't your mother, he said, in the school, they had to submit who was going to go to the schools and who was not going to go. And why didn't the headmistress of the school call in your mother and get the Ministry of Education to give her a letter and send you to Mr. Lynch, which was the modern high school in that day, but it was Lynch's Secondary in Robert Street. I said, well, my mother, nobody never gave me no letter to take to my mother. She don't know anything about down this side of the world. My mother came from Rockley. My father bring her down to town, I don't know for what reason, and then treat her like a dog. So she didn't know no person or nowhere to go.
Yes.
He said, you would have had a seat in Mr. Lynch's school because he was very much into education.
Yes.
But you know, it was only years down the line that she said to me a day, well, you know, this Mr. Lynch that is talking about the education man, when he was living at my aunt in Bay Street, she used to have all kind of big people coming at her having dinners and lunch and stuff. I used to serve him on the table because my mother would go at her aunt, and but she had to go there and live and work for her thing.
Yeah, but your point, ma'am, though, is that
I was deprived of a secondary education because nobody from the ministry did not look into the file to see that I gained a seat at St. Michael's School, could not go because of my mother working for $3 a week in Belvin, and nobody looked to see, well, this child is an intelligent child. Why keep her at St. Ambrose?
Okay, that was quite unfortunate because in those days it was a difficult thing. We are in the modern day now, and essentially what I am trying to say is that since you live in Bridgetown, in the city, that the city should have good schools for people living in the city. Now, I do not believe that if you have a capital city, that the persons living there are so educationally poor that you have to bust them out of the city in order to give them an education. Capital cities, and I can use London because I am very familiar with it. I live there and I keep abreast of what happens there. London is the capital city of England, and it has people from all over the world, black, Pakistanis, people who came in without speaking English and so on, and have persons of poor economic standing as well as high economic standing. But it has, in large measure, a comprehensive system of education where students of all levels go to a comprehensive school. And what has happened over the years, it didn't happen overnight, but in recent years, recent decades, notwithstanding all of those problems that are in London, London is the #1 performing city in terms of education in England and across the world. So while in fact we do see that there is a problem, if it is properly tackled, I believe that the persons like yourself who live in the city should be having good city schools for people who live in the cities.
Okay, 12 minutes past 11. We go to our next caller. Good morning. Let's talk about it.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Mr. Adams.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, this Supreme.
Thank you, sir.
This is the most comprehensive argument and discussion I've heard with respect to the reason why the 11 plus should be abolished and on education in Barbados and that the structural history of education in Barbados.
Thank you.
And has educated me to a degree that I now have to sit down and really and truly write about it in a far more informed way. So I really and truly appreciate the things that you have said today. Now, it also explains certain things to me, and because there are a number of questions I've been asking over the years. Every year we identify that at the 11 plus there are a whole set of children who are no longer who can pass English and math. And I keep on asking the question, if we have identified those children and that is the problem at the primary school, why are we not directly addressing that problem at the primary school to start?
Yes.
Okay? Right? Now, when it then comes on to the reason and the rationale, again, I went to Harrison College, and I have always, one of the questions I always ask again in this whole conversation about educational reform, first question I've asked is, why can't you build a school that is better than Harrison College? Right? And now you're telling me, because again, the irrationality explanation that you're giving me, it is also because of the mentality of the people who have been in power over the several decades or whatever of our education, that they do not see, I don't want to say not just the need for it, but you conceptualize and say that we can do that. Right? It's almost foreign to them. And therefore what I keep on seeing is that we pull down the standards, right, in order to bring a certain level of equality, as opposed to saying, let us raise standards, let us build schools that are better as a college to start, and also let us then send children, just send the children there to start. Okay?
Yeah.
One of my arguments as well is that we're still living in the past, because we are now dealing with a situation where we have the internet, where prior to the internet in the 70s and stuff, when they went to school, you had to go to seek education. You had to go to seek knowledge. So therefore, every Saturday, for example, I would go down to the library and go in the reference section and sit down, because I had to go and find books on the things that I was interested in. We are in a situation now where you have access to all the education in the world almost at your fingertips. And we are not then really and truly still thinking in terms of how do we develop, based on that, a new system of education that is far, far more appropriate.
Yes, you need to cut in there a little bit, because you made some very, very good points. I think what I bring here what the Prime Minister said. The persons who are doing the education reform, they spoke of schools of excellence and so on, and that has come under a lot of attack, and perhaps rightly so in a way. But the significant point is that a government has the responsibility of producing good schools. You might not have to say excellent, but good schools all over the island. And it is not so much that you have to build a school better than Harrison College, but you have to start on the assumption that you have schools that can cater for students of varying ability and allow them to reach the maximum height academically and otherwise that they can reach. In relation to Harrison College, you know, even in the past, the so-called good or bad past, several people living around the city, in and around the city, actually went to Harrison College. That is the history. Carrington Village, the Ivy, including the Back Ivy, down in Lakes Folly, and all those areas and so on, did in fact have persons going to Harrison College, which is saying that while you had that level of access and entry in those days up to the 1950s and 60s, you were still having that, although many of them were going on scholarships because they really couldn't pay the fees. You have to ask yourself the question now, why is it such a sin for persons from Carrington Village and the Ivy and so on to go to Harrison College today? So it is something that we have to look at. I came from the north, and in the early days the two schools were very small. Then when they amalgamated them, you had the Coleridge and Parry, and 1952 when those was built, I went there in 55. They had only 330 students or so. In those days it looked like a lot. But what the record shows is that virtually 100% of those students from the north went to that school. You scarcely had a single student going to that school that did not come from the north. And because of the nature of the north, as the school expanded, several students from the lower economic bracket was able also to get into the school. Originally, most of them would be middle class, but who went to Panama and so on and had some money. But essentially, when I got to the school, there were several persons in my form and in the school generally whose parents were cane cutters, and my father was a cane cutter actually, and my mother was a maid. So I'm simply saying that there is not a ceiling of the ability of students merely because they come from the working class. And if you change the structure of the school system and the attitude of the school system, we would find that what is happening in, I know you're a researcher, if you research London, you would find that London is the highest performing region in the whole of England, notwithstanding the inner city students of blacks and so on, and indeed in the world. and it has a comprehensive system of education. Now, we do not have a comprehensive system in education. We have a very divisive hierarchical system, which some people refer to as comprehensive. But a comprehensive system of education will operate on the basis that children of varying ability can come to that school and be able to perform as other countries in the world. Let me finish off here by saying one point, and this is from research from Britain. Around the world, selective education systems, that is the 11 plus, were being replaced with comprehensive ones, which happens all over the world with the high-powered education countries. The Scandinavian countries and Japan had begun the process immediately after the war. Israel and most of Europe had followed. New Zealand and Canada and Australia and so on continued with the reforms they had started before the war, and it went all the way into Eastern Europe. I just want to end off by saying that it went on to say that the only country in the world that did not reform their education system was the United Kingdom. They didn't do that until 1960, when they were forced to do it because they became the sick man of Europe. But the people in Barbados who were run by the English Hammond and those who was your head teacher, those were the people who dictated to the politicians in Barbados what changes or the status quo should remain, and what they said to the politicians in Barbados never had the testicular fortitude to stand up to those people of both parties, both of the parties. And they went on with the fact that the grammar school as set up by Mitchinson in 1881 should not at any cost at all be touched. And if you were to examine what happened when the community college was introduced in Barbados, I don't know if these two young men went to the community college, but Barbadians would say that there was piss and hot pepper. There was a tremendous uproar in this country when the community college was being established, because the sixth form schools, the elite sixth form schools, opposed it to the extent that they went on strike for 3 weeks. 3 weeks and not 3 days. They went on strike for 3 weeks, and they were supported by the bulk of the politicians from both parties in Barbados. Mr. Sandiford had a hard time setting up the community college in Barbados, and he had to compromise and leave the sixth form schools where they were, and you have the community college. And up to now, the sixth form schools oppose the community college, especially in relation to the Barbados scholarships and so on. So I want to finish by saying that we need to move away from a system of education that was not designed for the economic development of Barbados. And education, it is really almost a sin to discuss education outside of the realm of economics and social development, because from the time you do that, you are going down into what I would call a pedagogical rabbit hole from which you cannot extricate yourself, because education and social and economic development are really two sides of the same coin, and no meaningful discussion can be carried on in Barbados. And that is what is happening with the discussion about reform. It is not being tied to the economic development of the country, and the Prime Minister knows that if the education system is not reformed, the new republic cannot make its way in the world. By now, in 2040, you will be a breadbasket case.
Mr. Adams, okay, let me just quickly say this, okay? Because I have absolutely no problem with reform, okay? But the challenge that I have is that what we speak of right now as reform and the idea of the schools of excellence was about still segregating children based on ability and based on the determination of ability.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
And that, Rick, so when they hear that, right, that is wrong. and this is a question when I've asked in terms of building schools that are better than Harrison College. Because when I speak in terms of, I went to Harrison College, okay? And I don't want to say being sheltered, but a lot of people who went to Harrison College would be very, very sheltered. Because I would never forget when I went to St. Lucie Secondary when I was an adult. I went to do something.
Yeah.
And I was shocked at the school. And I'm saying to myself, this is not why when I go into the assembly hall can I not see the plaques of the people who have achieved things in the school? Is the attitude when you go into school is the environment that you're going into that has to then culture the type of person that you want to develop.
Okay, caller, you have to wind up. We are coming to the end of our program.
Mr. Adams.
Yeah, you have hit the nail on the head, because what has happened is that the newer secondary schools are almost starting over every year, and that culture and ethos that you would build, and also the fact that the students have no commitment to the school. A child from Silver Sands does not have a commitment to a school in St. Lucie, and nor the parent. And your point about what you would see if you went into Harrison College or Combermere or some of the schools, where you can see the development and the ethos and so on right there and so on, it is not there, and so there's a disconnect between the child and the school.
Okay, Mr. Adams, before we end, I'll give you 2 minutes to develop your point on the importance of reformation of our education system here in Barbados, our new republic, Barbados.
Yes, I think for the people of Barbados, I think it is the defining issue of our times. And I believe that it is directly related to the economic development of the new republic. I believe that if the education system is not reformed, we would be going against the findings of UNESCO and the World Bank and the ILO, which they have shown that sustainable economic development is tied to the education system. And they went further and found that that is particularly true in small island developing states. They use Singapore and Hong Kong, as not even the other industrial countries, as examples which show that since those countries reformed their education from the 1960s, there were countries that were breadbasket cases even behind Barbados. They reformed their education system to be in line with their economic development, to be integrated into the development. And as a result, they caught up Barbados and went past Barbados. And we have fallen behind and are falling further behind. And the trend is that unless we reform the education system, we will never be able to compete with those countries, because we are not only competing with St. Lucia and St. Vincent, we are competing with the rest of the world.
I want to thank you, sir, for your erudite presentation this morning. You're a retired educator, but erudite and revered researcher. We thank you so much for your contribution this morning.
And Josh, I could not agree with you more, Mr. Adams. We thank you very, very much, and we expect to have you back here with us soon. All right? Thank you very much. Let's Talk About It was brought to you with the kind compliments of East Caribbean Flour Mills.